everybody, and welcome back to the light side
of the paranormal.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Alice, and today we're going to be talking about sleep paralysis.
So what is sleep paralysis? So about 40% of the population will experience sleep paralysis throughout their life. What it is that you are waking up from sleeping and you become conscious and aware. You can open your eyes, you can hear what's going on around you, but your body is completely paralyzed. So you cannot move, you can't turn your head, you can't speak, but you can see if you choose to open your eyes, and you can hear. So what scientists explain this as is like a poor transition between sleep states. So it's almost like you're waking up while your body is still in a dream state of paralysis. So our bodies experience at certain points through our sleeping paralysis so that we don't act out our dreams, because that would be dangerous. So your body becomes paralyzed, but usually for the most part you're still dreaming or asleep, so you don't realize it. But should you have a sleep paralysis episode, you would wake up and be conscious and you cannot move. Most of the time it only happens for a few seconds to a few minutes, but depending on what occurs during these episodes, it can feel like much longer than that because it can be so frightening. Also, people experience during this time, not everybody, but most people experience a pressure on the chest or a choking feeling, like they're being choked. And it can be very hard to breathe. And scientists say that this is a harmless situation. It will pass. It's scary, but it can't harm you.
So who would be more likely to experience sleep paralysis? People whose sleep schedule changes drastically, people who are just lacking sleep in general, people who are under a lot of stress, or have bipolar disorder or any other mental health conditions. More often than not, people who sleep on their back experience it. Individuals that experience other sleep problems such as narcolepsy, people who abuse certain substances such as drugs or alcohol, under different medications, but especially ADHD medication, interestingly enough, and individuals that experience cramping during the night, more specifically in their legs. So as far as treatment for sleep paralysis, there isn't a whole lot out there. Your doctor isn't going to say, hey, take this medication, it'll make it all go away. That's not really how it works. So more often than not, they'll just tell you to try and get more sleep, get onto a better schedule, stop stressing out so much. But in other cases, they would just treat the underlying causes such as like narcolepsy, like any of the larger issues that you're experiencing that are causing the sleep paralysis. They would just try and treat that, and in turn, treat the sleep paralysis.
Okay, so what is the paranormal side to sleep paralysis? So
this is my favorite part.
Yes, well, this is why we're here. So for centuries and all over the world, most cultures, which we'll talk about after, have their own word for what this is. And most of them, actually all of them, are paranormal related and related to something demonic or something scary on the paranormal side. So most of the people who experience sleep paralysis experience the same symptoms on the paranormal side, which are the heaviness on the chest or the choking feeling, seeing somebody else or something else in the room, more commonly a shadow person or a shadow being or a scary demonic creature type thing. Something else is in the room with them. most often you get a sense of evil, negativity, dread. You feel like you are going to be killed by whatever is in this. More often than not, you feel like this episode of sleep paralysis is going to kill you, which is terrifying enough, not to mention there is something else in the room that's going to kill you. People see these creatures climb on top of them and choke them, or they'll also hear very scary things because you can hear what's going on in the room around you. The scariest part about that, I think, is that not only can you hear what you might be hearing from these creatures, some people hear growling, some people hear talking, some people hear whispering or other sounds that are frightening, but you can also hear your partner next to you breathing, or your cat or your dog next to you breathing. So you are hearing regular noises in reality as well.
Which makes it feel all the more
real. Exactly. Yeah. And then the scientists would have you believe, on the scientific side of this, that these are all just hallucinations because your body is still dreaming. But because you have both, a lot of people lean towards the more paranormal side of it.
And if it was just a dream, how could all of these people all over the world be having the same dream?
The exact same situation.
Explain
Exactly.
that.
That's my part on this. How is everybody all over the world having the exact same thing happen to them? But most people experience intense fear and the feeling that this isn't like a natural occurrence, that whatever else is in the room, or maybe not in the room, but there is something else doing this to them, paralyzing them, tormenting them, and then you snap out of it and you are terrified. More often than not, it's either a shadow person or a woman or an old hag, which we'll get into later, but an old hag, like an old woman doing this to them, or a woman doing it. Among many other things, lots of people experience different things, but yeah.
More commonly,
yeah,
that's what's seen.
Yes.
So, going off of what Jenna was saying about how people all over the world are experiencing this, well, interestingly enough, there are so many, I guess like every culture or every place, like they have their own word for sleep paralysis, and the direct translation of those words is very interesting in terms of looking at this from the aspect of the paranormal. We're not going to begin to try to pronounce these words because we just don't want to say it wrong. Like, I don't want to seem disrespectful and like not pronouncing it properly, but I am going to tell you the direct translation of what those words mean. Right, so Indonesians, it's pressed on.
So like the choking or like the
heaviness on the chest.
Yeah, on the chest.
In China, held by a ghost. Hungary, witch's pressure. So again, talking about that heaviness on the chest, that feeling of being held down by a witch, which I find offensive.
Yeah. Which I choose not to take personally.
Yeah. We'll give you that one, Hungary. In Newfoundland and Canada, they call it the old hag. And as someone who has grown up in Canada, I've heard the story of the old hag.
Yeah.
And it is exactly what we've been talking about. I just didn't realize until recently that that was talking about sleep paralysis.
Oh, okay.
I just knew it as more of like...
Or like they would call it like old hag syndrome.
Yeah. It was sort of like a folklore sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting for me, like, studying this now to see, oh yeah, okay. But anyhow, so that's what we call it here, old hag syndrome.
Yeah, and then also if you are like somebody experiencing sleep paralysis, they would say like you're hag ridden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Dutch, it's night space mare, like nightmare, but you know, like an old female horse is called an old mare.
Yeah.
Nightmare, because it's a woman a lot of the time.
Right.
In
So
the
that's
night.
like where nightmare came from.
Yeah.
Like literally nightmare came from sleep paralysis episodes. So like some theories as to like what's going on is, I think for the most part, it goes towards demons or some type of evil being that is trying to get you in one way or another. Also, other people have thought that perhaps it is alien abduction, or like you are being studied by aliens, so they have paralyzed you so that they can study you, and unfortunately your brain happens to wake up while you're still paralyzed and you see them in the room doing whatever they're doing. Other people say like the old hag or ghosts, but also other dimensional beings that are studying us or something along those lines, and that the scientific side of it is just like the 3D kind of reasoning as to what's going on, when it's actually like a multidimensional issue, if that makes sense.
I get that. I get
Because
you.
there's multi-dimensions, but you need an answer for what's going on in this dimension in 3D, so it's sleep paralysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, something going hand in hand, this is just like a little
Side note.
Also, something that kind of goes hand in hand with sleep paralysis is something called exploding head syndrome, which not a lot of people know about. I've found not a lot of people know about what exploding head syndrome is, or it is also called like EHS for short. But probably a lot of people experience it, but don't know what it is. So if you want to talk about it.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me. Again, I was experiencing this and I didn't realize that it was a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought that
like a million other things in life, right?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. But that's why it's so much fun to study these things.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, exploding head syndrome is right when you're about to fall asleep, you hear this huge crash, bang, almost like a bomb is exploding right close to your ear, and it like startles you and you wake up. Or I mean, I guess sometimes you don't always sit up, but I know for myself, like I'm like picturing it right now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you almost like catch your breath, like, and it's just so loud.
Yeah.
I find sometimes I'll experience that too if I'm like having a dream where I'm falling.
Yeah.
And then the second I crash, you know, it's almost like you fall back into bed and it's that sound.
There's a feeling of jerking with it.
Yes.
Or a feeling of like snapping out of something.
Yeah.
But
we
it
keep
always
doing this,
comes.
but that's what it's like.
It always comes with a very insanely loud noise that you wake up. And I know for myself, well, it's been happening forever, but lots of people wake up looking for the cause of the sound because it's so real when there hasn't been a cause for the sound. It's in your head. There's no known explanation for this whatsoever, as far as I could find. There's no known explanation. It's just as you're falling asleep, you hear these sounds. So honestly, I hear a lot of things as I'm falling asleep. It's almost like I become in tune with other dimensions or other realities, and I hear talking, I hear conversations, I hear people talking to me, I hear people talking to each other, I hear conversations that have already happened, I hear a lot of stuff, but I'll have the loud bangs as well. And I know for myself, I didn't understand it until like a couple of times I woke up being like, how did nobody else hear this? And the only reason I knew it was only in my head is because I would wake up and be like, what the hell was that? It sounds like the whole house has shook. But my husband is still asleep, which I mean, he sleeps through anything, but also my dog and my cats have not moved. So then I know it's not a real sound, because it still happens. And I'll wake up and be like, was it real or was it exploding head syndrome? And I just look at the pets. If they haven't even stirred, I know it was in my head. But it is insane that you can hear a sound like that and it's not real.
Yeah. And something else that's worth mentioning is I find a lot of the time it starts with a swelling of the sound, if that makes sense. Like it'll start out kind of small and just and get louder until it's just big crash.
And if you're curious, we found a YouTube video, which we can link down below, of a simulation of exploding head syndrome. And to be honest, the first time I watched it, I had anxiety like through the roof in
like
a matter of
super triggering.
seconds. It's very triggering.
Yeah.
Because it is to a T. It's like a very like boom, and it's so accurate. Whoever made that,
good job.
I don't know how they were like fully conscious to understand like the sound that they were hearing, because when you wake up you almost don't know what woke you up. You just know it was a loud sound. But if you want to check that out, we'll put the link in the description below, because it's wild.
And I recommend that you listen to it with headphones on to get the full experience.
Yes, exactly.
There was a period of time in my life where I was experiencing exploding head syndrome like almost nightly.
Yeah.
And then it stopped. And I find it comes in waves. Like every few years I'll just go through that phase and then it'll go away. Like why? Do you know why?
No. There's
so
not
many
even
unanswered questions.
There's not even a known cause, like what's happening inside your brain. There's also been people who have woken up to this and think that they're having a stroke or that something is seriously wrong with them, and which is scary, especially since there's no known cause. Like, does that mean that you're more susceptible to something medically, or like what?
I don't know.
It's scary. But they do say that they go hand in hand. Most people who experience exploding head syndrome also experience sleep paralysis. So, true for me, not true for you. Because
I've never experienced sleep paralysis, but I have experienced exploding head syndrome.
Weird.
Yeah.
Also, a little bit more rare, people do say that when they hear the bang, they see a flash of light as well.
Yes.
Which is probably kind of why they think it's something more medical too. If you're seeing like a flashing light that's not there, that's kind of scary too.
But like,
I've never had that.
My brain, when I think flashing light, I'm like aliens. Like that's just where I go. Like sorry.
Insert ancient aliens meme here. Aliens. So, sleep paralysis. You have never experienced sleep paralysis.
No.
Okay, so I'm filming this next bit alone. Alice has never experienced anything when it comes to sleep paralysis. So I have experienced sleep paralysis as far back as I can remember. I can remember being in bed in my childhood home, being maybe like 8 or 9, struggling with being able to fall asleep because I was so terrified, because every single time I fell asleep, I would experience this choking feeling. So it started out for myself not seeing anything, just feeling like I was being choked out in my sleep, and then waking up at the very last second, enough time to be like and then be okay, and I'd be scared to fall asleep. It already took me so long to fall asleep as a kid because of all my other experiences and the dreams that I would have. This was just icing on the cake. And I remember one night, it would happen every single time I'd let myself relax and fall asleep. It would happen. It must have happened maybe 5 or 6 times in a row, until finally I was like to tears and kind of having a panic attack. And I remember being like, I'm gonna pray. And I was praying to God that this would stop, and it literally worked. And I think that was the turning point in my life where I was like, there is something else divine out there that is watching over us. If I ask for help from the divine, it will come. When I was in high school, it used to happen a lot as well, and to the point where I was not really experiencing any visual or audio symptoms. So it was just the waking up, or first of all not being able to breathe, and then waking up gasping for air. So I was sent to a sleep clinic because they thought I might have sleep apnea because I was waking up gasping for air. But sleep paralysis wasn't like a widely known thing then, I don't think. So it was never brought up by my doctors like, maybe it's sleep paralysis. That was not a thing. It was just like, you don't have sleep apnea. And I was like, great, I guess this is gonna keep happening, which it did. I will tell you a couple of the scariest times for myself that I remember. So I was in my 20s. Often for me, sleep paralysis would happen if I woke up, I would see my husband off to work, and then I would go back to sleep for an hour or two because I wouldn't have to be at work until later in the morning. And every time going back to sleep, that's when I would get it. Either that or the fact that I was home alone once he left, because that was also in a home that had a ghost. I talk about that in a different video that we have not uploaded yet, so stay tuned for that. But we had just moved out of that place, and that place I used to get sleep paralysis a lot, almost every night. And I would always get it on my back. If I was sleeping on my back, it would happen. So I trained myself to sleep on my side, and for years and years and years, I would never sleep on my back. This one time it had happened, we had just moved out of this home, and I felt hands, one on each side of my legs, like something was crawling up to my face. And I saw the shadow of a person with a little bit bigger head than normal, almost alien-like, hovering over top of me. No facial features, like just like a shadow person choking me out, and I woke up gasping for air. Another really scary time that I remember, this one night I was sleeping, and for years, like I said, for years and years, I would never sleep on my back. It was just not an option. You sleep on your side if you don't want this to happen. This night, I'm on my side, my left side, facing the wall. I was home with my daughters. They were sleeping. My husband was away, out of town, for several days at a time. And it started happening. And I was able to kind of open my eyes, and then I could hear my front door open and close. This is the middle of the night. Somebody walking up my stairs, and then someone coming into my room, and someone crawling in bed behind me because I'm lying facing the wall on my side. Someone crawl into bed behind me, and I thought, oh, my husband must be home. Occasionally he'll get done work late at night and be like, I'm just gonna drive home so I can sleep in my own bed tonight instead of staying in a hotel for the night, leaving in the morning. Usually he tells me when he's going to do these things, so I'm not totally freaked out. The only thing I could think of was, oh, he's home. So I felt something crawl in bed next to me, and then I felt breathing and breath on my neck and my ear, and then I snapped out of it, and I turned over, and there was nobody there. There was nobody in the house. I wanted to call my husband and be like, are you here? But I just knew it wasn't him. That was really scary, and that was the moment that I realized, I guess it's gonna happen on my side, my back, it doesn't matter. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. So I was able to kind of slowly let go and start sleeping on my back again. The most recent time it has happened to me that has been memorable, I was at a hotel. It was an evening before my daughter was to have surgery, and I was stressed out, nervous. I'm nervous for my daughter. She's having surgery the next morning. I had to wake up really early. I had my alarm set. I really didn't want to sleep in. The stress probably had a lot to do with it. And the nervousness, my nerves had got the best of me. I woke up, I opened my eyes, I could look around, it was a dark hotel room. My daughter's in bed next to me, and I could feel somebody putting pressure on my chest. And I thought, originally I was like, oh my gosh, like to my daughter, I'm like, you need to stop, you're hurting mommy, you need to stop. And then like pushing harder and harder, and me being like, you have to stop, like she's doing this in her sleep, she doesn't know what she's doing. And then seeing almost like a little girl, or a girl, maybe not too little, maybe teens, in a white dress, long black hair, flip her leg over top of me to straddle me and choke me. And that's when I woke up, and me being like, that wasn't my daughter. That's not at all what my daughter looks like, or how old she is whatsoever. And that was really scary. It was really hard to fall asleep after that. I'm in a hotel, like who knows who's in there with me, right? But it's always such a sense of fear, and the choking, it's always been the choking for me, like I'm going to die. Every time I get it, it feels like death. So many times now, I've struggled really hard to say my husband's name when it's happening. I can see him. I know he's right there. I can hear him. If he could just wake me up. It's such a struggle. And I find that I try so hard now that most times when I snap out of it, I snap out of it with a scream. And it wakes him up and it scares him, because I'm just so, it's a very like, and I sit up, freaked right out. Also one time, no visual, but I could hear my daughter screaming for me, like something really awful was happening to her, and I could not wake up. That one seemed to be one of the most scary things, is knowing something is happening and you can't do anything about it. So finally, I snapped out of it. I snapped out of it with a scream. I woke up my husband. I got up and checked my daughter. Sound asleep. Everything was fine. That was the fucking worst. So not too many people that I know experience this. I do have two friends that over the course of however many years we've been friends, it has come up that this has happened to them. So I asked them to write in to us their scariest moments of sleep paralysis, and so that I could share them with you. So the first one I have is from Rachel, and she says, I can't remember the first time I had sleep paralysis. I want to say it happened around when I was 13 years old. It would happen every now and then, and it was always when I was waking up in the morning. I couldn't move or breathe, and I always thought I was going to die. And then somehow, right at that point, I would wake up gasping for air. I thought this was normal. The very first scary incident for me was when I was dog sitting at someone else's house. I put a movie on in the room I was sleeping in, since that's how I normally fell asleep, with the TV on. I woke up at 4 a.m. with sleep paralysis, like I normally would experience. But it was never that early in the morning. When I noticed the time, I became freaked out. As I was falling back asleep, I went right back into having sleep paralysis. This time, I was able to open my eyes, and at times, I even had bouts of not being able to breathe, but the whole time, I was unable to move. Suddenly, a very loud noise in my right ear. There was a deep growling sound. I immediately felt like something was on top of me, and I finally snapped out of it, but that wasn't until 6 a.m. It was by far the scariest thing that I have ever encountered. And for a year after that, my sleep paralysis became overwhelming and it controlled my nights. I had horrible anxiety, and going to sleep became something terrifying. The second scary experience that I remember was having this fear wash over me and thinking, oh no, not again. I woke up at 3 a.m., completely terrified, and I just knew that this was going to be sleep paralysis. I almost fell asleep a few times and felt the sleep paralysis starting again. I tried to stay awake, but eventually I was exhausted and I finally gave in and sleep paralysis took over. I remember not being able to breathe or move and feeling like something was at my front door. I kept telling myself to wake up, and then finally I heard a voice whisper in my ear, "Wake up." Right after, I woke up immediately and I didn't feel anything in my room anymore. The first experience I had with the growling, I knew it was something demonic. The second experience, it didn't start out that way, and I feel like the voice may have been something trying to help me wake up because it didn't feel scary. So another story that I have is from a friend of mine. His name is Brian. So Brian says, "Hey Jenna, so I've had instances of sleep paralysis for as long as I can remember, but it doesn't happen very often. It probably has only happened twice in the past 5 or 7 years. It seems to start with some sort of bad dream. I think sometimes I'm being chased or that someone's trying to kill me. After that, I open my eyes and I can see around the room, so I guess I must be sleeping on my back, which is weird because I never do that. Like we said before, it often, almost always happens when you're sleeping on your back, for whatever reason that might be. Every time there's a tall, dark figure at or near the end of my bed, basically a tall shadow. I always am certain that they're there to kill me, so I will try and move to protect myself or try and scream, but I never can. This probably only lasts a few seconds, but it feels like minutes. Eventually, after trying to scream for a while, it wears off and I can sit up and breathe again, and the vision goes away. It's definitely not the nicest thing to wake up to." Okay, so we're going to quickly do the what happened to you this week.
What has happened to us?
Yeah, so what has happened to you?
So for me, well, it wasn't really to me, it was to my husband Chris, but I was away for a weekend at a bachelorette party, and so he was alone. And being a skeptic, he wrote it off as one of the cats, but we have small cats, so I don't know how they could have done this. He said he woke up at 3 a.m. like he usually has been, and it was as if someone was in the room, and we have like a big like steel footboard on our bed, and it was like someone went like with the footboard like really hard, like shoved it like towards him in the bed, and to the point that he was like, oh my gosh, like he was actually freaked out.
And then he was asleep and that woke him up? Or was he awake?
He had woken up,
okay.
Looked at the time, and then it happened.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I wonder if it happened a first time to wake him up.
Right, and maybe he didn't.
And then he didn't realize it, and then it happened. I wonder.
It could have, but I will say, even as a skeptic, he was really nervous and like kind of freaked out telling me this story. And then was like, oh, it was probably just the cats. But like, really. And he told me that he looked and couldn't find the cats.
Oh, yeah.
So like, come on. But yeah, so nothing has really happened to me, but that was really freaky.
Yeah.
How about yourself? What has happened to you this week?
So, I have a nest system in my home. So I have if you don't know what that is, it's a system that is in your house. I have one box upstairs in my kitchen, one box in my basement on the ceiling, and it is a fire alarm. It's a carbon monoxide detector, and I think it does a couple of other things too, but it also connects wirelessly to your phone so that if you are out, you can get a text saying that your fire alarm is going off, etc.
That's so handy.
Yeah.
This is the
not
future,
sponsored,
people.
but it's awesome. So it has a large button in the middle that you have to press pretty hard, and it will say, my one upstairs will say, in the kitchen, press to test. So then you press it, and it will say, now testing for smoke. And it'll scan the air, test for smoke, and then it'll say, all clear, and then it'll say, now testing for carbon monoxide. Same thing, test, all clear. My one in the basement, like I said, is on the ceiling. You have to press it pretty hard, and it will say, in the basement, press to test, and then you have to press it again if you want it to test. I was standing at the top of the stairs. I was home alone, and I had a bunch of blankets. Sorry, I wasn't home alone. My kids were in bed. My husband was away. I had a bunch of blankets in my arms, and I was coming down the stairs to go put them in the laundry. I was standing at the top of the stairs, and I heard talking in the basement, and I was like, what is that? I didn't leave my TV on. And then I listened, and I heard the in the basement, press to test. And I was totally freaked out because there was nobody here, and it is on the ceiling, and you have to press it pretty hard for it to go. And I have never used it before. Neither of the nests have ever malfunctioned where they have said that on their own. So it totally freaked me out. It was also the evening of my husband's aunt's funeral, and he was at the funeral at the time, which was very interesting. Also, power went out.
That same
night briefly.
Oh my gosh.
And then came back on. And oh yeah, and then a couple minutes after I heard that, I came downstairs, put my stuff in, didn't see anything else, went back upstairs, and then it almost felt like thunder in the basement. Like I felt like a rumble. I don't think it was thunder outside. Very interesting. Anyway, that's what happened to me.
That's so freaky.
I also have another interesting story about the same kind of situation, but I'll talk about that at another time.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found that it was interesting, or if you learned a thing or two, give us a thumbs up. It really helps us out when you do that. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click your little bell so that you know when we upload and you can watch it and keep up with us.
Yeah, so if you've ever experienced sleep paralysis, leave us a comment of your experience, or just if you have or haven't, or any other interesting facts about it. We find it very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
if it's a longer story, feel free to email us. Our email is in the description.
Please do. And don't forget
to live your life with love and light. We'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Alice has never experienced anything. Alice has never experienced anything. Okay, buddy. I love you too.